Welcome to the MyRehab Cafe video podcast, everyone. It's great to have you with us again today. The MyRehab Cafe private and unsearchable secret Facebook group is the aftercare branch of the MyRehab group of dual diagnosis addiction centers, or ARC as it was formerly known as. The MyRehab centers are private inpatient drug and alcohol rehab centers that offer high quality healthcare with high quality outcomes. The MyRehab Cafe Facebook group has exclusive access to loads of content that isn't available on any of the MyRehab public channels. Some of the content includes workshops, lectures and support groups hosted in conjunction with some of the treating providers on the MyRehab inpatient centers. These treating providers include psychologists, social workers, wellness counselors, and volunteers who have extensive experience in the field. Group members also participate in movie and book reviews and from time to time face-to-face events. If at the moment you aren't a member of the MyRehab Cafe, you're likely watching this on a public channel, which means you'll have between 10 and 20 minutes of access to this live broadcast before we switch over exclusively to the private and unsearchable MyRehab Cafe Facebook group. Remember, sign up and join the MyRehab Cafe, as this is where the interesting parts of the live videos happen. MyRehab Cafe is free to any person that has been through the MyRehab inpatient program. If you haven't been through the inpatient process, but you want to find out how to join the MyRehab Cafe, please check out the MyRehab Cafe website. The address is www.myrehab.com. Let's say it again, www.myrehab.com. If you want to participate in this workshop, please join in via video or audio via the link in the comments section, or leave a comment and they should be able to bring it on screen and we can see what we can do about answering any questions that you may have. If you are a MyRehab Cafe member and you want a higher degree of anonymity or confidentiality, wait for us to end the broadcast on the public channels before hopping on or posting. I'll make an announcement when we're switching over. So with that, let's get started today. Let's have a little fun as we continue to talk about recovery and making the changes in our lives that we need to do to ensure that we reach the place where we want to be. So the theme for today is how to create healthy boundaries. And as we do that, the quote that we kind of using for today from Harriet Lerner kind of fits with this. And she wrote this: an intimate relationship is one in which neither party silences, sacrifices, or betrays the self, and each party expresses strength and vulnerability, weakness and competence in a balanced way. I'd been looking for a quote that kind of would fit with boundaries, would fit with the topic for today. And when I came across this one, it kind of jumped out at me because it kind of says everything. It speaks about that when we come into a relationship, we come into it as individuals. And as individuals, we kind of don't suddenly want to change who we are in order just to please somebody else. But we maintain our own integrity. And often what happens in relationships, especially when we get into codependent ones, is we enter into relationships where we believe we've got to change ourselves in order to fit with our partner, or our partner's got to change themselves in order to fit with us. And that's not fair. We are who we are, and we love somebody hopefully because of the person that they are, no matter what type of relationship it is, whether it's a friendship, whether it's a romantic relationship. But so we kind of need to allow the other person to be who they are. And if we kind of, through our actions, silence them, if we take away who they are, then we deny them the opportunity to be the person that they are. We also deny ourselves the opportunity often. Often we won't express our opinions. Often we're scared to rock the boat. And so our own individuality, our own wants and our own needs are kind of pushed to the side. And often what happens, we talk a lot about compromise in relationships. And very often it's the same person that's going to compromise all the time. And if it is you who's compromising all the time, in the end, either you just kind of become somebody's patsy where you kind of sit back and they ride over you, or else it builds up and then explodes. So to be in that place where we are not silenced, we don't sacrifice ourselves or betray ourselves within a relationship is really important. And that we have the opportunity to express both our strengths, our courage, our capability, as well as being vulnerable, being able to open ourselves up, being able to share our fears, our concerns, those challenges that we have as go forward. So I think there's a lot in this quote that really focuses on relationships and how we do it. So an intimate relationship is one in which neither party silences, sacrifices, or betrays the self, and each party expresses strength and vulnerability, weakness and competence in a balanced way. So why setting boundaries? I think when we look at kind of those people who've passed through the MyRehab centers, we see that so many people really battle with this idea of setting boundaries in their lives. And it becomes something that we really have to focus on and find time and space in order to make these challenges and to move them forward. So it's really important for us to understand that setting these boundaries is essential if we want to be both physically and emotionally healthy. Because when we create healthy boundaries, we empower ourselves. When we recognize the need for us to set limits and to enforce these limits as we go forward, we also kind of protect ourselves. We kind of protect our self-esteem, we maintain self-respect, and we also enjoy better and healthy relationships with other people. Because we know that when there are unhealthy boundaries, that this kind of causes emotional pain that leads to dependency, depression, anxiety, and can even result in illnesses that have been induced as a result of stress. Kind of, I suppose you can liken it to having a lack of boundaries being kind of like leaving the door to your home open, where anyone, even unwelcome guests, kind of can enter at will. But if we also have too rigid boundaries, it also can lead to isolation. It can lead to us living in locked up lives where we kind of almost in a castle surround ourselves with a moat with crocodiles in it, so nobody can kind of come into us and nobody can get out. And often we do that because of our history, because of we've been hurt in the past. So what then are boundaries? Boundaries, we can define them as being guidelines, as being rules or kind of limits that we create. We identify that are reasonable, safe, and permissible ways for other people to kind of act and respond around us. And also they enable us to kind of know and understand how we will respond when someone steps outside kind of those limits. So I suppose the easiest way to think about boundaries would be thinking of it of something like a property line, where we've all kind of at some point seen no trespassing sign, no enter. would send a very clear message that if you violate that boundary, if you kind of go against that sign, that warning that's been put up, there will be a consequence to you. Now, this kind of boundary is very easy to picture. And it's also very easy to understand it because we see the sign and we can see the boundary, kind of the border that it's protecting. Personal boundaries sometimes are a little bit harder to define because often the lines are invisible, they change, and also they're unique to us. So what may be a boundary for you may not be a boundary for someone else. But personal boundaries, just like that no trespassing sign, also define where we as human beings kind of end and others begin. And it also determines the space that we allow between ourselves and others. It kind of determines and helps us to decide what sort of types of communication, what sort of behavior, and what sort of interaction are acceptable for us in our relationships with other people, whether or not those are friendships, whether they're relationships with people who we kind of only come into contact once or twice with, or even in our intimate relationships, that we're able to set those boundaries and take them forward. But what is the importance of setting these boundaries for us? Why do we need to be able to do this? And there are four primary things that I see. The first one is that it helps us practice self-care and self-respect. When we're in a place that we're not looking after ourselves, not caring for ourselves, it doesn't really matter kind of what happens. We become like I said earlier, with that home with the front door always wide open where people can kind of come in and out. So we're not really caring for ourselves. People will walk in, walk out of our lives, say what they want, do what they want to us, with us, and we don't really kind of have anything in place to stop it and to say, you know what, no, you can't do that. So when we put boundaries into place, it's not just about us being nasty or horrible to other people, but it's really saying, you know what, I have value. I'm important. Who I am, where I am, what I'm going through matters at the moment. And so I'm putting this boundary up so that I protect myself, that I'm caring for myself and ensuring that in this relationship, that harm doesn't come to me. The second one is that boundaries help us to communicate our needs in relationships. Now, we've all been in relationships at times where kind of our needs have been ignored, where somebody is so stuck in themselves and in their own lives and in what they're going through that they fail to kind of recognize where we are and what we're going through. But by setting boundaries, by being able to say, you know what, this is kind of how I would like you to behave towards me and how I want to behave towards you, that creates the space and opportunity for us to communicate our needs and to take it forward from there. The third thing about boundaries is a real positive one. It helps us to make time and space to interact positively with those around us. So once we know what our boundaries are, once we communicate our boundaries with other people, once they recognize, acknowledge them, and deal with them with us, we're in a space where we can talk openly and honestly about where we are and what we're going through. It creates that kind of opportunity for us to look at ourselves and to interact in a way with people that's going to build us up. We're going to be able to share things it's also a place where, if you remember the quote from earlier, where it spoke about strength and vulnerability, where it spoke about weakness and competence. Being in that kind of relationship enables those things to happen. And that's why boundaries are important. And then the final of the 4 points about why it's important to set these boundaries is to be able to set limits in a relationship in a way that's healthy. Just because we're in a relationship with somebody doesn't mean that they can do whatever they want with us. Doesn't mean that we can just allow that to happen. And it also doesn't mean that we can allow them to do whatever they want to us as well. But being in this relationship with people where we're able to set these boundaries, say, you know what, this is what makes me comfortable. This is what enables me to develop myself with you, to develop a closer, more intimate relationship. That makes a really important and difference, and helps us to kind of develop these important relationships for ourselves going forward. So let's move on to kind of the types of boundaries that exist. And I'll just read through the list, and I think at the end of the list, then we're going to kind of cross over when we'll go into them a little bit more in more detail. So the first one is physical boundaries, the second intellectual, the third emotional, the fourth sexual boundaries, the fifth material boundaries, and the sixth time boundaries. So with that, we kind of going to cross over to the private MyRehab Cafe Group. Those of you who've been joining us on the public channels and are able to come across, I hope that you will. Those of you who are not yet on the MyRehab private group, please remember, go to the website and join. So I'll be with you again in just a minute. Take care.